Good morning, everybody, and welcome again to the centre. I see one or two faces I don't know, but it's good to see you all here, and especially on this Father's Day. I think if you believe in reincarnation, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about that today, I suppose we're probably all of us fathers in the past, so we can all celebrate this Father's Day together. As you can see from the topic of today's talk, it's a little departure from our normal Sunday discussions on Spiritism, and when you look back at the work of Allan Kardec, the three pillars of the work of Spiritism was actually one of the biggest one was probably based on the science of Spiritism. He was not a believer, he was a Catholic in fact when you look back at him. It was only when he was in his 50s that he started to be aware of all the phenomena that were going on in all over the world, not just in France where he was living and working, but in the US and in Europe as well. And he approached it in a very scientific manner, very skeptical initially, but the end of the results of all his work was the spirit codification. And again, it was based on a very logical approach, realizing that the phenomenon, there was more behind the phenomenon, that the spirits were really trying to communicate. And although initially the communications were very rudimentary, he developed a very sophisticated approach and understood there was a message behind those communications, and over a period of about 5 or 6 years put together the spirit codification. Before I start in the talk, I want to acknowledge a couple of people here. One is Susanna for putting me out of my comfort zone, so I'm standing here today before you. Well, my first reaction was, I'm not qualified to give a speech here. I'm new to Spiritism. Before that, I would probably classify myself as an atheist, so I've come a long way since then. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here and say, it's amazing when you do prepare for a speech like this, how much one does learn, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for Susanna give me the...
I'm sorry, could you put the mic toward you a little bit?
I'm sorry, yeah.
It's okay.
There we go. Better? She gave me the liberty of also choosing this topic today, and actually contributed a few of the suggestions which I've included, and links that I've included in the talk. The second person I'd like to thank is Daniel Assisi. I met him here at the centre, I think it was last October, when he gave a talk on Allan Kardec. Not only the content of the talk was very inspiring, but his ability to communicate and to teach, and actually using the software called Prezi, which I'm using today. I want to give my thanks to him. I also want to make a point that this software is a little bit complicated and sometimes it freezes. So if it does freeze, bear with me, okay? Okay, the objectives today really are to share with you some of my explorations over the last 2 or 3 weeks I've been working on this, looking at what evidence there is out there in today's current science. Let's go back, let's move from 150 years from Kardec to today and see what evidences there are out there that really support reincarnation and the evidence of the spirit world. I think I'm probably preaching to the converted. I think everybody here probably believes in reincarnation, and maybe the spirit world, maybe we have some doubts about the spirit world out there, I don't know. But even if we are convinced, it's good to see some evidence, particularly scientific evidence, that supports that point of view. And often I find when people ask me, like friends who know me and say, oh, I'm going to the Spirit Centre, and they, what is that? You know, is it you whatever? And it's good to have some links of information that you can say, well, look at this site, look at this. There's some good information out there that really does, in my point of view anyway, support reincarnation and the spirit world. I'm going to cover 4 areas. One is reincarnation and past life memories, and particularly in young children. Out-of-body and near-death experiences. To a lesser extent, the out-of-body, but there's some interesting work being done in this field. And near-death experiences, there's a tremendous amount of documented evidence on near-death experiences, some of which cannot really be verified, very subjective, but there are some cases which I'll bring to today as well. Mediumship and we'll talk a bit about that. And then finally, I'll talk about other scientific evidence. A lot of this is perhaps my own speculation, but I think there's some interesting things I can share with you today. Obviously, any one of these subjects is enough meat in there for a whole weekend's discussion. So it's going to be very superficial. What I have done is actually created a file of all the links that I've used, and some of which I'll show snippets of today. So if anybody's interested, give me your email and I'll send it to you, and then you can click on what you like to delve into more deeply. So we'll start with past life memories, and particularly in young children. And this is a very big field. It was started by Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. And he spent a greater part of his life, 50 years, working on this. He was succeeded by Dr. Jim Tucker. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about Carol Bowman. She was not an academic, but she's done a lot of very interesting work in this field. So first of all, let's talk about Dr. Ian Stevenson. He was born, I think, in 1918, passed on in 2002. He was actually educated in medicine in England. His career was actually interrupted by the Second World War, but he went back to Canada. And then he basically focused on psychiatry, 50 years at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. You read about him, it's interesting because he always felt that medicine at that time was very much compartmentalized. Everybody looked in certain, and he wanted to look more at the grander scheme of things, and got interested in this whole field when he heard a lot of cases, particularly in India and Sri Lanka, of children that when they were first beginning to talk, 2-3 years old, they started relating memories or events that they had no exposure to, that even the parents didn't know what they were talking about. And he went to India to study it in more detail. He had 15 leads that he wanted to work on, and came back with about another 25 cases. When he got back to Virginia, he actually managed to get some support from a friend of his, Chester Carlton, I believe his name was. And he was actually the inventor of Xerox, so he had a lot of money. In fact, later on, this Chester Carlton died and donated $1 million to the university. And he started his department where he really spent the next 30-40 years working on this. A lot of the cases were very interesting, that they actually found cases where children had birthmarks or even defects that were related to the past lives, and I'll come back to that later. So he founded this society and wrote many, many papers. He did have some skeptics too. A lot of people felt that his work at the time was not scientific and shouldn't be done at the university, but he did continue. He was, Jim Tucker took over from him, I think, in 2002, and again, with a very extensive psychiatry background. And this book, this Life Before Life, was really a summary of all the work over the years of Ian Stevenson. I've got a little bit of a video here I'd like to share with you.
At a very early age. A lot of our cases were ones that Ian Stevenson investigated years ago, particularly in Asia. So one is a little girl named Kumkum Burma in India, who said that she had lived in a city that was 25 miles away, and not just that she lived in the city, but named the district where she lived. Her aunt wrote down a lot of what she was saying, which included a lot of details like son's name, grandson's name, what the son did for work, town where the father lived, a lot of other personal details. And then eventually, a friend of the father's went to that district and found that, in fact, all the statements the girl had said were accurate. And then that's sort of typically what happens if the child gives enough details, including names of places, then people have often gone there and found that there was, in fact, a match for the statements that they were making.
You have the birthmark cases and the cases where kids are injured. Several of your cases dealt with children being born without fingers or toes, but they had recounted that in their previous life, that's how they died. Can you give us
Well, that's right. I mean, there are a lot of cases. Ian wrote a book of over 200 such cases of kids with birthmarks and birth defects that match wounds, usually the fatal wounds that the previous person experienced. So, for instance, there was a little girl who recalled the life of someone who got his fingers chopped off as he was being murdered, and then was born with very deformed fingers. There's another little boy who talked about being born in another village who had lost the fingers of his right hand in a fodder chopping machine, and then he was born, his left hand was fine, but his right hand didn't have full fingers. There's also a little girl, a case where the previous person had had skull surgery just before dying, and this girl was born with this band going around her head.
Very unusual.
So that gives you some of the flavor of some of the work that we're doing. Very, very, very interesting, very compelling evidence, I believe. Carol Bowman, she did a lot of work. I said she was not an academic, but she's written a lot of books. And her most famous case, I believe, involved James Leninger. I think probably a lot of us heard about that. I'll just show a snippet of this video. But this was a boy who was born with, had a lot of phobias in his when he was 2, 3, 4 years old. But as soon as he could start to talk, he started relating stories about aircrafts and dying in an aircraft and knowledge of even parts of the plane that he had never been exposed to in his life. And this is just a snippet of, I think it was a NBC. Whoops, I'm sorry, I've gone wrong here. All right, here we go.
Age 3, going over a plane as if he's doing a pre-flight check. He would continue to say and do things that were puzzling, like the time his mom bought him a toy airplane.
And I said, oh look, there's a bomb on the bottom of it. He said, that's not a bomb, Mama, that's a drop tank.
A drop tank?
I'd never heard of a drop tank. I didn't know what a drop tank was.
Andrea's mother suggested she look into the work of counselor and therapist Carol Bowman. Bowman has written 2 books, both supporting the proposition that sometimes the dead can be reborn.
We are taught from a very early age in this culture, in the Judeo-Christian culture, that reincarnation doesn't exist. Once you observe this in a child, and the evidence is very compelling, you have to open up to another explanation for what is going on.
Bruce was deeply skeptical.
He said there has to be a logical explanation.
I don't believe in past lives. I don't believe in this stuff.
So again, through therapy, the child was actually cured of all these phobias. And as he got older, and it is often the pattern with these children, by the time they reach 5, 6, those memories start to disappear. And again, all those past life memories are usually associated with phobias from what would appear to be a violent end to a previous life. Just want to change tack a little bit. This is a case of Jacob Barnett. In fact, it was Marcelo who referred me to this particular boy. This boy is a child prodigy. I mean, amazing. And I'll show you a little bit of the video here. This is not past life memories, but it does sort of probe the question of why is someone born with such talents. Just show you a little snippet of this interview he did on 60 Minutes. And oops, I wasn't meant to show you that yet.
Of numbers known as pi.
3.14159265358979323846264338327950.
Jake memorized more than 200 of pi's numbers in an afternoon.
9749445923078.
And he did it just to test himself.
You want me to go backwards from there?
Well, sure.
It's a really interesting video to watch. He's currently, I think, he's graduating at 14 from university, going on to do his doctorate in astrology and astrophysics. It's amazing to watch the video, I tell you. It's really, really very good. Okay, so if you look on the internet, there is 1 or 2 cases of people supposedly through mediums have found that Jacob was actually the reincarnation of Ida Noddack. She was a German physicist nominated for 3 Nobel Prizes. In fact, some say that she's Jacob has actual physical similarities in the face of this person. That's speculation. I'm just throwing that out there. But it's interesting that we're all here. 98% of our genes are common to chimps, and 99% of our genes are common to each other. The other 1% come from our parents, and from where else? Past lives? I don't know. But just for a bit of diversion, I want to show you.
We scientists have now located a gene which we scientists believe gives people the need to believe in God. In other words, this God gene releases chemicals into our body which create the impression that there is meaning in the universe. And this God gene is just here, between the gene which we scientists now know makes us eat coconut ice cream after a fish dinner, and this gene here, which causes people with weak egos to grasp around desperately for simple explanations. Now, the discovery of this...
No, I like John Cleese anyway. He does there's about 50 videos, iPod, of him doing different subjects. I thought this one on the God gene was very interesting. Okay, so back to some serious work now. Regression through, with children and memories of past lives is not just with children. There's a lot of work being done in regression through adults. Again, normally treating phobias that normal psychoanalysis is not able to address. And the biggest, I think, expert in this field is Brian Weiss. In fact, last year, we went to see Brian Weiss in the Miami Book Fair. He has an amazing background, and again, he was he says himself, a very conservative scientist. He did not really believe in religion, certainly did not believe in reincarnation, until he had a patient, this Catherine, who suffered tremendous phobias, and he wasn't able to, through normal therapy, to relieve her and help with those phobias. So he tried hypnosis, and she started to talk about past life in I think it was the Roman times. And when she came out of hypnosis, she didn't know what she'd been talking about, but he followed up on the things that she was saying and found there's a lot of truth and details and facts that came from the past. And in further therapy sessions with the hypnosis, she started to communicate about his son. And he had a son, a 6-year-old son, who died tragically. And she started to give him details surrounding that death of the son and details of the family. And then he became really convinced that he was looking into past life and the spirit world. And he changed tack and developed his whole life to this subject. In fact, now he teaches regression therapy, has taught thousands of other therapists to use the technique to address problems, phobias with people that are originated in past lives. Just show a little bit. Oops, sorry. So I'm not the expert on Prezi yet. I'm trying, but just show a little bit of. He actually has a video on YouTube where he actually does the hypnosis over the video. I tried it. I didn't find anything, but it's very interesting. It has a beautiful demeanor, and
Oftentimes people experience past lives in other ways, not just through regressions or hypnosis. For example, in a dream. Sometimes what you dream about is a past life memory fragment and not a Freudian symbol or metaphor or distortion. Or perhaps you're traveling in a foreign country or city, you've never been there before, and you know your way around, and you know where the old church was that burned down in the 1800s, and the secret room in that church and what happened. Well, that's, we call it déjà vu, past life memory, that just being in the physical place evokes, stirs up, and you have this déjà vu, and that's kind of a past life experience too. Or you meet someone, and they seem so familiar to you, as if you've known them for years and years, but you just met them. Well, this kind of recognition, a soulmate recognition, can also be a reflection of a past life connection.
So again, I recommend you see that video. And he goes on to do actual hypnosis and a session and see what it does for you. Okay, so we talked about regression. Let's go into a little bit now, very briefly, on out-of-body experiences. Last year we had a field trip from our English Spiritists, the Spirit Book group, and we went to see this Dr. Wagner Allegretti, Brazilian, who engineer, but has spent, well, I'll let him tell it himself, but he basically has the ability to create his own out-of-body experiences at will, basically. And he's now teaching the technique, has a center here in Miami. But let me just, yes, here we go. Just a little snippet here of, oh. Oh boy, let's go back to him, yeah. All right, just a little bit about it.
Fez uma reciclagem
but,
existencial importante na vida dele. Eu vou perguntar aqui que reciclagem foi essa, e é autor da obra Retrocognições. Wagner, um prazer tê-lo aqui no programa Ciência
Todo
e
meu,
Ciência.
muito obrigado.
Que história é essa? Que reciclagem foi essa que você fez? Conta um pouquinho da sua trajetória, Wagner, pra gente.
Bem, talvez para iniciar, eu comecei a ter projeções conscientes quando eu tinha mais ou menos uns 10 anos de idade. Obviamente, numa família sem maiores conhecimentos sobre o assunto, então comecei a ter as projeções, não tinha absolutamente nenhuma espécie de informação material sobre isso. Mas gostava das minhas projeções, que claro, naquela altura eu não sabia bem o que era, e eu chamava de super sonho naquela época. Como uma criança sem nenhum conhecimento, foi a minha linguagem. Mas de qualquer forma, eu já mostrava que era alguma coisa diferente do sonho comum, porque eu via que tinha uma história, que ele tinha nexo, tinha controle. Então,
I'll stop it there in the interest of time, but at the talk that we saw at the University of Miami, he did some incredible experiments where he took people who could create their own out-of-body experiences, and he did some MRI scans at the same time. And he put the patient into the machine, created a baseline, asked the person to create this out-of-body experience, and the activity in certain areas of the brain became really apparent. But the most interesting part that we found there is that the activity actually extended outside the brain. So he was having an effect on the molecules outside his physical body. So that to me was something, wow, I couldn't actually find the copies of the actual visual that he displayed at the talk. I don't think he's published it, yeah. Okay, near-death experiences, as I said earlier, there are literally thousands of documented near-death experiences. There's a couple of websites that list all these, and some of them are very interesting. Most of them are not really confirmed scientifically, but there is a theme, the theme of going into a tunnel and light at the end, and so on. But one of the most convincing near-death experiences by Dr. Alexander, who was a neuroscientist, very well respected in his field, and he had a near-death experience and wrote a book about it, which is always, to me, sometimes a little bit of a question mark whether he's doing it for the commercial gains or what. But this was very sincere, and it was obviously a contribution to this whole
November 10th,
field.
2008, a Monday morning, and I woke up about 4:30, which was an hour earlier than I normally would. Got out of bed and felt an intense pain in my lower back. And of course, I was also at that time starting to slip into unconsciousness, because if I'd been more alert as a physician with severe back pain, severe headache, I would have immediately thought of meningitis, but I was too far gone to be thinking anything. My first awareness deep inside of coma was one in which I had no words, I had no language. I did not remember anything of my life on Earth. I knew nothing of humans, nothing of Earth or this universe. The meningitis had completely wiped out any notions of my human identity or existence. And then it was as if there was a summer breeze, a perfect summer wind blowing through. And even though the whole scene remained the same, my awareness of it changed completely. And I was out in this void of infinite coal black, but with an orb of light, and with that warm, divine presence.
We'll stop that one there. There's also another series on, I think it was on Discovery Channel, on Morgan Freeman through the wormhole. A lot of very stimulating talks, but he actually gave one on one of those talks is on near-death experiences, and Dr. Alexander talks more about it at length on that TV program. Okay, mediumship. Again, if you go to Wikipedia and look at mediumship, the theme running through the article is that there's no scientific evidence for mediumship. We all know here about Chico Xavier, who had very little formal education, yet wrote 430 books, 2 over 1 weekend, I understand. So that's not scientific evidence. I don't know what is. But I want to talk a little bit about Gary Schwartz. And again, thank you to Susanna for referring me to this particular talk that was given at the 7th Spiritist Symposium in Atlanta this year, I believe. Gary Schwartz was actually, again, a renowned psychologist, psychiatrist. He was graduated in both Harvard and Yale, and has been spending the last part of his years at Arizona University. And he has done some experiments. Whoops, wrong way. Whereby he created an experiment. He found a very, very sensitive photometer. Basically, it would pick up very, very almost individual photons. He put that inside a box, and he put a box around the box and a box around the box. So there's virtually no light could get in. And then what he did, first of all, he established a norm, because I'm saying no light can get in. This thing was so super sensitive, it did detect some photons. And he established a baseline. Then he asked a medium to ask a spirit to go into the box. And he see if he can measure some energy, some electrical activity, some energy. I'll just give a little bit of his talk. And again, I recommend you see the whole talk. It's available
Well, we began doing research under controlled conditions. We did a series of initial experiments. Here, this blue bar, can you see this? This one here, this black bar, sorry, it's blue light. This black bar represents the average number of photon bursts in 300 seconds. Each trial was 300 seconds long. And there were many, I don't remember, 20 or 30, whatever, trials, where we could get the average background, quote, noise, what the computer was detecting with the single sensor. And this was actually in a double box, a box within a box. And so you can see what the bar was here, and this is what's called the error bar, standard of the mean. So that tells you what the variability was.
So the variability is this.
And then we compare that with a series of trials, multiple trials, where we invite spirit to come into the box. And you'll notice it's much higher. It's about a 80% increase.
So, you know, again, when the spirit entered the box, there was a doubling of the level of activity. He wanted to publish the paper, and there were some skeptics saying, well, it's influenced by the people in the room. So he then created a further experiment where he asked the medium, asked the spirit to go there at 12 o'clock at night, and a computer randomly generated a new time for the spirit to come back, for the medium plus the spirit to come back at, say, 2 in the morning that nobody knew about. And again, he got the same results. So it's very compelling, and I think it's one of the few real scientific evidences of the spirit and mediumship. Okay, let's try and move on here. Sorry. All right, so we've covered a little bit about reincarnation, outer body, and mediumship. I'm going to spend these last 5-10 minutes just doing a little bit of scientific exploration here. Starting with the Big Bang, okay? Big Bang happened almost 14 billion years ago. Here are a few milestones from first life on Earth was about 4 billion years ago, and then the dinosaurs, and then the start of what we now know as human existence. Lucy was the ancestor we can trace our DNA back to, and then the human race 200,000 years ago, and then Jesus, and even Allan Kardec. When you see this scale, it's a little bit deceptive, because we're talking from billions of years to hundreds of years. So I've just created a little slide here, which I say, okay, let's say the Big Bang was 10 years ago. 10 years ago. So the first life forms were 4 years ago. Lucy was a day ago, okay? Jesus was only 6 minutes ago, and Allan Kardec 4 seconds ago. So what I think it illustrates is that the amount of development of the human race is so new. When did God, or as my friend Daniel Sizis used to like to call him, grand old dude, did he create the Big Bang? Did he then was very tired, so when he came back to create the human race down here? I don't know. Maybe Marcella can answer that afterwards. But also, if you look at the development of the human race, and this is world population here, we're now around 7 billion in this today. The projections are suggesting that we'll probably end up at 9.5 billion if we can feed all those mouths. As you know, the actual birth rate is actually falling in Europe and the developed countries, but it's still increasing in the developing countries. But my question, I asked this question to Susanna once about, okay, so now we're 7 billion spirits incarnated on Earth. Where did they all come from? Because 1,000 years ago, there was only a few of us. And the answer I got was, well, other planets, other worlds. And that brings me to the next subject, which is life on other planets. In the 60s, a scientist called Drake got together a group of people and said, okay, let's work out mathematically what is the possibility of life on other planets. And they came up with an equation. Obviously, it's probabilities, it's not exact science. But just in the Milky Way, putting in all these factors that are supportive of life as we know it, they came up with a number anywhere between 1,000 and 100 million planets in the Milky Way. And that's in the Milky Way, which is just our galaxy. And there's billions of galaxies out there that could support life. SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has been going for 40 years with no results, no direct signs, but the technology is now being upgraded. Who knows, they might find something. And then more recently, the Kepler telescope. It was launched about 4 years ago, and this was a telescope specifically to focus on one area of the Milky Way to try and discover extraplanetary planets that could, what's the word I want? Exoplanets, they call it. And it is, they have a website on NASA, actually. And up to yesterday, they found 132 planets that could support life. I won't go into the technology and how do they detect those planets. But there's 132 planets they confirmed that could have all the conditions to support life as we know it. They've got like 3,000 or 4,000 candidates that need more readings. So even with our Milky Way, there's very, very strong evidence that a life like we know it could exist. And this is my last slide, so timing's been pretty good. The Hubble telescope, and we've all seen pictures of the Hubble telescope, amazing pictures of not just our galaxy, but the other galaxies. But one of the major results of the telescope was the observations from supernova, and which then gave the conclusion that the universe is still expanding, but accelerating, not just expanding, but the rate of expansion is increasing. And by all conventional science, quantum mechanics, I said, the gravitational pull should be slowing that expansion rate down. But it's not, it's increasing. And the only way that this can be explained is through a concept which is really not a concept in itself, really, but it's just saying there must be something else there. We're going to call it dark matter, we're going to call it dark energy. And these two account for 96% of what we know. This is what we know. This is what the planets, this is what we see on the telescopes, this is you, me, and everybody here. 96% to create this expansion of the universe is dark matter, dark energy, we don't know what it is. And the reason I'm throwing this in is, you know, we talk about science, but really, there's a lot of questions out there that we don't know. Could this be something to do with the spirit world? Who knows? So just to finalize, I want to come back to Allan Kardec and Spiritism. From a personal point of view, even without the science, if none of this that I've been presenting today made sense, I'd still be here on a Sunday, okay? Because I come here not because of the science, which does interest me, but I believe that the doctrine, the Spirit doctrine of reincarnation, that we're here to learn, we're here to make choices, we're here to become a better person. And one hand to increase our virtues, and the other hand, get rid of those vices. And to me, that's what really matters. And with that, I'll end my talk. Thank you.